Welcome to Real Success with Steve Dennis. You are now tuned in to another episode of Real Success. This is the podcast where we share inspiring stories based on relationships, encouragement, attitude, and the leading of self. We're so glad you can join us. And now, here's your host, Steve Dennis.
Well, hello and welcome to Real Success with Steve Dennis. Oh my, the second part of Keys to Leading Yourself Well. I'm so glad that you have tuned in and to be a part of this episode in this particular podcast today as well. We greet you and wow, again, I love sharing this from my heart, that the mere fact that you've chosen to push play and to allow my voice to come into your life to be a voice of reason, a voice of encouragement, and even a voice of hope. I'm deeply honored by that. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for pushing play, for being a part of this podcast, okay? So we're going to continue on with Keys to Leading Yourself Well, and I'm just excited about it because one of the favorite things I love talking about is to dig into what I call reflective questions. And when we get close to the end of this particular episode, we're going to do that. We're going to dive into some reflective questions, okay? So the last episode I gave you two keys to leading yourself well. The first one was to develop and deploy self-discipline. Well, we talked about discipline is the ability to give yourself a command and to follow through with it. I just love that, okay? And then the second key to leading yourself well is to practice patience. We talked about the importance of practicing patience on the front end so that you don't have to try to catch up or see patience delayed on the back end, okay? And so, that's where we left off at. And so let me share this Chinese proverb with you before we dive into the third key of leading yourself well. This Chinese proverb says this: when you see a good man, think of emulating him. When you see a bad man, examine your heart. Boy, I just love that, don't you? When you see a good man, think of emulating him. But when you see a man that you might consider to be bad, examine your heart. I know it. I can hear you. That would make a great post on social media, wouldn't it? Okay. All right. So let's dive into key number 3. And key number 3 was very important for me because of the fact that the third key of leading yourself well showed up for me probably in 1992. In 1992 was the very first time that a friend of mine recommended a leadership program, a leadership cassette. It was actually 2 cassette tapes, and that was a part of this program by John Maxwell on leadership. And I still have that 2-part cassette tape program to this very day. I keep it because it was the very first time a piece of content was that showed up in my awareness on studying and learning about leadership. And so the third key of leading yourself well is to keep learning in order to keep leading. Okay. Whoa, this is so good. Let's dive into it. Keep learning in order to keep leading. And that was huge for me because in the 80s, there wasn't really a lot of books on leadership. There was a lot of books on management, but not on leadership. And so in the early 90s, this cassette tape series was a huge help to me. I learned and heard phrases that I had never heard before. I think it was actually John Maxwell's Developing the Leader Within You. was the name of that particular tape series. And I thought, developing the leader within me? You mean there's a leader within me that wants to be developed? And then once I started listening to the tape, it dawned on me that to a certain degree, by default, I had recognized that the leader was there. But it wasn't until I had a design that I could develop the leader that was within me. You see, my friend, oftentimes we're either living our lives according to default, or we can choose to live it according to design. And here's what I know as a leader and as an influencer: it is much, 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 much better to live your life by design than it is by default. Oh, to me, one of the most scariest of movies would be to constantly live my life by default, because I would continue to default to a lot of my past conditions and circumstances and past programming. I mean, I can't imagine today. It would be a scary movie if I was trying to live my life completely according to default. Think about it in your own life for a minute as well, okay? Just what a scary movie, huh? Okay. But we're talking about keys to leading yourself well. And again, this third key is to keep learning in order to keep leading. Because in order for you and I to really reach our potential, okay, the secret to your success can be found in your daily agenda. Because in order to reach your potential as a leader, you and I, we have to keep learning. It's important to have a plan that we can grow and to choose to grow and to develop ourselves. Just vitally important, because I have three attitudes I want to talk to you about real quickly that will help you to really see just how vitally important it is that we make that decision to keep learning so that we can keep leading. And again, because the power of my leadership lies in the fact that I must choose to go first. Remember that if you heard the first episode, and you remember that statement was real big in the first episode as well. Okay, but so here's a question for you. What kind of attitude do you have when it comes down to learning? Think about this for a minute, okay? What kind of attitude do you have when it comes down to learning? Because I have found out that people tend to fall into one of the three categories, okay? In other words, one of the three zones when it comes down to their attitude about learning. The first zone is the comfort zone. And the comfort zone says, I do what I already know I can do. That's the comfort zone. And that's an attitude when it comes down to learning, that people just get comfortable with where they are, and they do what they already know that they can do. Okay. And so I've heard it said that probably 80% of most college graduates, when they graduate from college, that 80% of them would never pick up a book to read again. What a sad commentary. Because when you and I, just because you get the degree, and just because you graduated, just because you reach a certain pinnacle or a certain level of success, does not mean that you stop growing. No, there's still more to learn. There's still more to learn. I mean, you never stop learning. Okay, very important statement. That you never stop learning. No, you can be 20 or 80 and there's still something in life that you can learn, and there are areas in your life that you can grow in, okay? I just love being around growing people. Okay, here we go. So the comfort zone. The next one is the coasting zone. The coasting zone. And the coasting zone says, I don't even do what I've done before. I'm just coasting. I don't even do what I've done before. I'm just coasting downstream. I'm in the coasting zone. All right. But the third zone, and again, this is the one I suggest that you and I make a decision that this is the zone I want to live in. And it's called the challenge zone. The challenge zone. Not the comfort zone, not the coasting zone, but the challenge zone. And the challenge zone says, I attempt to do what I haven't done before. I attempt to do what I haven't done before. You see, my friend, it's a sad day when a person chooses to leave the challenge zone and stop growing. So I want to challenge you. There's that word again. I want to encourage you to let's get in the challenge zone and let's stay there. Huh? Let's get there and let's stay there. I mean, the challenge zone, if I make the decision to get in the challenge zone and to stay there, it'll keep me from the comfort zone. It'll keep me from the coasting zone. You know as well as I do, probably a majority of people live in the coasting zone. And a great majority of people get stuck in a comfort zone. I know I do. I have as well, and probably you have as well. But again, the purpose of this episode is to encourage you that there's another way. At least I now know. And again, when I was younger as a leader, I didn't realize that, I got into a comfort zone. And when a challenge showed up, I was not really ready for the challenge. Why? Because I was in the comfort zone. Something new had showed up that challenged my leadership, dealing with people. I had this one position where I had to deal with people that I considered to be difficult to deal with. And it was a challenge. Have you ever had a challenge that kept you up at night? Have you ever had a challenge that caused you to even question, are you really the person that needs to be in this position at this particular time? The challenge showed up and it was humongous and it was big in my life simply because of the fact that I was living in my comfort zone and on the weekends playing with the coasting zone and not realizing, not having an awareness that the best way to lead myself well is to get in that challenge zone and to stay there. Well, I attempt to do what I haven't done before. So let me kind of share with you some steps that you can take that will really make a difference in regards to helping you to become to be highly disciplined in your growth. Okay. Number one, and this is from my own personal life, okay? This is what I do, and it's something I do that really helps me, makes a big difference with my growth. And I've been doing this now for well over 25 years, And that is, I read daily. I read daily so I can grow in my personal life. I read daily. My father could not read or write. I literally saw my dad, who was 61 years old when I was born, but I literally saw my father sign his name with an X. I remember vividly coming home with my report card, and I would love to show my dad my report card more so than my mom, because my dad couldn't read. And so I would just lie and tell him that the D was actually an A. Okay, I know it, right? Bad kid, Steve. But here's my whole point. Taking advantage of my father's ignorance of not being able to read and write. But here's the back end of that lesson. What was that lesson really teaching me later on in life? Oh my goodness. It taught me, Steve, whatever you do, listen to your father. Because my dad also would always, he would say to me, make sure you learn as much as you can. Because he would tell me, I cannot read or write. And he wanted me to, he wanted all of us to be the best version that we could be. But here's my whole point. The underlying lesson that I took from my father's life is the joy of reading. And so I have to be honest with you. Once I got into reading and purchasing books, that would help me to grow. It's one of those it's one of those values of mine. It's one of those practices of mine. It's one of those philosophies of mine. I'm constantly reading and growing. And I've been doing it now for so many years that I choose to continue to do it every day. And that is, I read daily to grow in my personal life. My friend, you have to be intentional on growth. It doesn't happen automatically. And those of you who probably listen to me, this may sound, for some of you, you're already familiar with this, but some of you, it may be a different level of listening, a different level of learning today. It may be something you're not familiar with, but I want to encourage you, no matter where you are in life, choose to be intentional on growing yourself. Okay? This statement helped me years ago. I heard from my mentor, Dr. Earl Soto. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Make yourself better. You do not have to stay in a coasting zone or stay in a comfort zone. You can move today. It's time to move. It's time to move to your challenge zone. So I read every day to grow in my personal life. I listen daily. Back in the day, I was listening to cassette tapes, okay? And then it moved from cassette tapes to iPod, right? And now, of course, we have podcasts, all right? But I listen daily. Now, don't tell anybody I told you this, but I still have CDs and I have a few cassette tapes. Doesn't matter what method I'm listening. What matters is that I'm listening to bigger thinkers, brighter thinkers, leaders, and people that are further along than I am. Because you listen, it makes a difference who you're learning from. Okay? And so I listen daily. Why? So that I can broaden my perspective. Oh my goodness. One day I need to do a podcast on the books that have shaped my life. Because I listen daily. And why do I listen daily? Because I want to broaden my perspective. Wayne Dyer taught me this. Be open to everything, but attached to nothing. Just food for thought. Just how to be open, but at the same time not so attached. Anyway, okay, here we go. So not only do I read daily, but I also listen daily, and I also, check this one out, I think daily. I think daily so I can apply what I learn. So when you're listening, when you're reading, make the time to think. To think about what you're reading, to think about what you're listening to. Because I think daily so I can make application out of what I've learned. One of my favorite stories about one of the keys to leading myself, and that is to keep learning so I can keep leading, is that years ago with my son, he's 25 now, but when he was a teenager, and this may be a good exercise for you as well. When he was a teenager, I had asked him, I said, son, what I want you to do in 3 months from now, I want us to come back and to sit down and have a 2-hour conversation. And in that conversation, the purpose of it was simply this. I said, son, what I want you to do, I want you to think about this question, and I want you to have an answer for me so we can talk into it more in depth. And the question was very simply this. What are you learning from my life? I wanted my son, at that time 14, 15 years old, I wanted him to think into what were some of the lessons that he was learning from my life. We came back months later, 2 or 3 months later, and we talked about it because he had been keeping up with a journal and writing things down. And I won't go through all the things that he said for the sake of time, but one of the things that he said to me, he said, Dad, one of the biggest lessons that I'm learning from your life is how not to take things personal. He said, that I've heard you teach that before, but now I'm watching you live it out. And my friends, what an amazing exercise. That's something you might want to do with those that are closest to you as well. That question can really help to encourage you of just how well you're staying on course. And on top of that, it also reveals that you're learning in order to keep leading. Okay, very good. The final key, the last key in this episode of leading yourself well is this. Seek accountability. Seek accountability. Oh, it's so important. Why is seeking accountability so important? Because here's what I learned. Lack of accountability in my personal life. You're going to love this, okay? Lack of accountability in my personal life will lead to problems in my public life. Seeking accountability is so vitally important. When you, again, because accountability is your way of recognizing that you have other eyes that are involved with your life. I love this quote. When a leader doesn't inspect himself, the people don't respect him. When a leader doesn't inspect himself, the people don't respect him. It's vitally important that you and I have an inspection process. And one of the best ways to do that is to seek out accountability, to have another set of eyes that have permission to look into your life and to speak into your life. Nothing is wrong with having accountability. It can be, as a leader, it can be one of your best friends. I had accountability growing up as a leader one of my friends who had permission to ask me questions in regards to maintaining my integrity and keeping my character in tip-top shape. He could ask me questions like, Steve, how's your thought life? What are you reading lately, Steve? How much time are you spending with your family? He would say to me stuff like this, Steve, I want to make sure, Steve, that you're not becoming a public success, but a private failure. So seeking out accountability, having people in your life. I could go down the road of different people in my life that have been accountability partners and accountability voices in my life. Okay, people that I sought out to hold me accountable for my behavior and my actions. So seeking out accountability is another key of leading yourself well. Leading yourself well means that you hold yourself to a higher standard of accountability than others do. And my friend, it is so important. Because you know what? This is big. And again, if you're the CEO, the manager, if you're the leader of an organization, if you're the leader of your family, if you're an influencer with your kids and your grandkids even, leadership is a trust and not a right. It's a trust. And so having that accountability in your life is so vitally important and will really make a huge difference in how well you are leading yourself. So as I promised, let me close this episode by sharing with you real quickly some reflection questions, okay? Questions to ask yourself while you're leading yourself. Number one, how clearly do you see yourself? How clearly do you see yourself? And what will help you to really exhaust this question is to review your performance. In other words, review your performance from last year. Look over your performance from last month or even last week. Okay. In other words, what are some of the major goals that you can mark as achieved? Or what are some of those goals in your life that you have marked as not achieved? But it's a wonderful question to ask yourself. How clearly do you see you? And that question, my friend, will also help you to be in that challenge zone of leading yourself well. Question number two, where do you need to grow? Where in your life do you need to grow? Do you need to grow in the area of patience? Do you need to grow in the area of self-discipline? Do you need to grow in the area of learning more so you can lead more? Do you need to grow? Do you need to grow in the area of having more accountability voices and eyes in your life? I can tell you, I have an accountability partner. His name is Romeo Marquez Jr. And Romeo, he and I have been accountability partners for the past 11 years. Well, we decided to take our accountability to the next level in 2020. And what we basically do, we write down action steps that we can take to help us to reach the goals that we're looking to reach. And we talk every week for about 30 minutes or so in regards to checking up on each other on whether or not we reach those goals. And so what we decided to do, and this was actually Romeo's idea, he said, Steve, what would happen if you and I would take one of those? We have 3 different action steps. So what would happen if we took one out of the 3 that became a very important step that we want to take? And if we don't carry out that action step, we owe each other $100. I said, you mean to tell me that if I give 3 different action steps and one of them is $100 action step, and if I don't do it, I need to pay you $100? He said, absolutely. And the same with me, vice versa. And so we did that. And so far, neither one of us have had to pay the other the $100, because it has allowed us to really get more intentional on being in action. And it all stems from accountability. So again, what do you need to grow? And here's the last question, okay? Last question that you can ask yourself that will help you to lead yourself well. How well do you take advice? You're probably thinking, Steve, that was a loaded question after what you just shared before that one, okay? How well do you take advice? Very important question to think into, okay? Because here's the bottom line. You can actually ask some of the people that are closest to you, how well do you take advice? If not, think into it yourself. Okay, so, because you can either be at a place where you don't want advice, or you can also be at a place where you don't object to advice, or you could be at this other stage where you welcome advice. And then on top of that, more advanced, you could be at this stage where you actively seek advice. But then finally, here's a good place to be. You often follow the healthy advice that has been given to you. And so again, those are just some reflection questions that you and I can ask ourselves that I believe without a doubt will help us in the whole process of leading ourselves well. Because again, my friend, it's very important. The power, and I would add, and even the potential of leadership is in your ability to do it first. Okay, hey, guys, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. I trust that value has been added, and the value that has been added to your life from these episodes will also continue to multiply. I see you on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us this week. Be sure to visit the website at www.steveadennis.com. You can follow on Facebook and Instagram. Please subscribe to the podcast via Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify at stevedennis1.podbean.com. Be sure to tune in every Wednesday for new episodes. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next episode.